Hey everyone, welcome to Figuring Out Fabric, where I ask dumb questions and you get smart answers. And I'm really excited to have Krystina on the show. One, because she's got decades of experience, but two, because it's really easy to reach out to some of my peers and get information from speakers and consultants and all that kind of stuff. But Christina is actually a user of Fabric. And so maybe has some more lived experience or some more pain points, all that kind of stuff. So Christina, do you want to talk a little bit about what your experience so far has been with Fabric, how you use it at work and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so a couple years ago when I started at my company, Kent Corporation, they were typical company. They had their hands in Power BI as well as some other things. And Power BI was a little new to me. I had more experience in Tableau and some other stuff.
Yeah.
But that was part of my duties and they needed me to do it, so I jumped in. And typical, right? As
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
any other
Field
person knows,
promotion,
hey, here's
right?
the new
Yeah.
thing. Go ahead. Um, it's not my primary thing, but I am one of the admins for it, as well as doing some design work in it. Our company's pretty big, and I work for the shared services division. So what that
Hmm.
means is we have 5 companies, and that's the IT one that is kinda
Oh,
encompasses all of them.
Bayer Material Science was the same way, or Bayer was the same way, where there was three different Bayer companies, and then there was the IT company, and it was
Yeah.
always kind of funny to me. I worked there for like less than a year, but the IT company would do chargebacks to the different groups,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so
yeah.
sometimes, yeah, and if they're not efficient enough, they'd be like, "Well, I know we have our own IT company, but like Bob's Radio Shack down the road can do it for cheaper, so we're just going to go with them." It was always
Sure.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah, when I was in consulting, before, we had a lot of that too when we did projects for, like, the CDC and things like that.
Yeah.
Everybody has different charging patterns, and
Everyone wants to be
it's
a profit center, not a cost center, right? Like, if you've
yep,
ever been a consultant, you know that you do not want to be a cost center because no one respects it.
yep,
Yep.
yep. So then, of course, one of the big products that we use is, the older version of AX, and we're moving to D365 F&O.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh, so a ERP for those not familiar. Um,
For those who have not had to deal with any of the Dynamics products, those lucky souls. Yeah.
yeah. Um, that in as itself is a database, that is not what you would say is a normal database.
No, I
And
mean,
we're
so aside, that's true for like every Dynamics database is cursed, just
yeah.
cursed. I never dealt with AX, but I did a lot of work with Great Plains at my last job, and
Okay.
they it originally ran on, I wanna say, Sybase or similar, like DOS era, which meant that all of the columns were 8 characters at most, and all
Oh,
of the table
nice.
names were 8 characters at most, and so for receivables transactions, it wouldn't just be receivables transactions, it would be table
Sure.
RM 1100 for the unposted transactions and RM 1200 for the posted. And then for Dynamics Nav, because what people don't understand is these are just companies that Microsoft bought and then slapped Dynamics on the name.
Yeah.
But for Nav, the way they did multi tenant, they didn't do different databases, they didn't do schemas. They just put like the company ID and then like a dollar sign and then the table name. So
Sure.
just yeah, from the 2 out of the 3 or 4 Dynamics databases I've had to support, just they're all cursed.
Yeah, now they have the concept in D365 of, is it a table or is it really an entity that's
Mm,
using, some other stuff,
right, that makes
under
sense.
the covers, which means if you're receiving it in things like Fabric, it gets super complicated unless you know that stuff. And I'm not a D365 person, but I now have been blessed with you're the Fabric person, and you get to go figure this out for us,
Yeah,
which has been great. But also, it's a lot. There's a lot of different things.
it's a lot of
It's a
moving
natural
parts.
thing for me to do for our company. I've worked with some of our Synapse solutions. I was the first one in with those. Those were their own headaches. I am part of our business and analytics team. So every I'm the one that would make the decisions for our data warehouse stuff that would be coming off
Okay.
of whatever ERP system we're using. So I have
So
to design not only the architecture, but a lot of times I'm doing the engineering as well. Um, working with
So where do
various
you
people.
fall on the org chart? Because the corporate structure you described makes me think that you fall under IT. But what
I
you
do.
just said, especially the name business analytics, makes me feel like you fall under like the finance org chart or something like that. So where are
No, no, no,
you?
no, no. It's so our analytics team actually is for all the things, right? It's for
Yeah, yeah.
our you're not we're a manufacturing company, so finance is for what we would call warehouses, not the same as is a physical warehouse type thing. There's different things that happen within a warehouse. All the inventory, all of that comes into the ERP system, and we need to make a data warehouse off of it so our business users can do analytics on that information.
Gotcha. So what I'm hearing is basically you're the middle woman for all of the business data and all of the analytical needs, and you have to figure out what's the best platform in between to be able to
Yeah.
service those needs for the business. Is that
And
kind of
now that
accurate?
when that's like the first in for a lot of these environments, I'm also I'm also on the board of our Cloud Center of Excellence team. So
Oh, okay.
being the first one into Synapse and the first one into Fabric, I'm now the one that is not just part of our team. It's okay, we need to pull Christina in for this for other
Got it.
needs
You're
as well.
the woman with the machete trying to clear the path through this mess for the business. That makes sense. I
Yeah,
don't
which
envy you,
means
but
a lot of documentation, which we in IT always love doing the
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
documentation.
People get into IT because of their people skills and their writing skills. That's why I did. Yeah, wasn't because I was just a little narrow, spicy, and did better with code than humans. But yeah,
Yep, yep, yep. I love and it's a great part is I get to work from home. So, yeah, I'm one of the few lucky still that gets to do that.
yeah,
Um, which you talk about how well we work with people. Yep, yep, yep.
yeah, yeah.
No.
No,
It's
it's
like,
all
"Do
good.
they really need to talk to me right now? Because 'Cause I'm working." That wasn't great for me in an office environment.
Yeah, right. There was at one point where I bought the little like you remember when ThinkGeek was a thing, the good old
Yeah,
days? I
you
bought the, like, rear view mirror for your monitor so you could see if someone was sneaking up on you because
sauce
I
me.
was I was never an introvert. Like, I've gotten better, but to me, there's this definition that introverts lose energy during social interactions and extroverts gain it.
Wow.
And so for me, very much so, if you come over and be like, "Hey, Eugene, how's it going?" You start talking, a little taxi cab meter pops up. And if we're talking about something important, that's awesome. But if you wanna
Yeah.
tell me how your cat, like, Butters, is doing, like, the meter starts rolling, I'm like, I don't wanna pay $5 to hear about your
No,
cat's,
no,
like, dental
but
cleaning.
it's a perfect example because at one of my companies, a guy would come over and talk about his cat for like an hour, and I'm like, I'm not getting anything done, and I don't have the social skills to tell him to go away.
Yeah, right, a very
I
polite way to be like, "Hey, I'm busy," without coming across as like, "Screw you." There's a book I'll put in the show notes called it's got the dumbest name. It's like How to Have Power and Confidence in Dealing with People, but it's mostly just basic soft skills, how to be likable, how to be thoughtful, how to respect people. Um, but it helped me appreciate that small talk can be kind of priming the pump for the more interesting conversations.
Yep,
Um,
yep.
but
When I
but
got
kinda
into
going back, so
consulting, I had to read a lot of those type of books, so
yeah,
yeah,
but
learn
kinda
this
going
too.
back, so you're kind of the exploratory scout. What
Yeah.
is your scouting mission turned up so far with Fabric?
Oh, Lord.
It's alright, this is a safe space. I only have, like, 50 downloads so far. I'm sure no Microsoft employees are listening to this, so it's fine.
No, no, even if they were,
Hi,
because
Alex
they had
Powers.
from me, so it's no problem.
Yeah.
So, some of the aggravations that I found
Yeah,
is one,
please.
our company, and I think I've posted about this lightly on LinkedIn and a few other places. One of the first things that we saw right away, we were all in. We were moving all of our different reporting services,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
recommendations saying, why do we have four? One, we need one. Let's move everything to Power BI service. When I first came in, and we've been that's a longer process, right? So we've been doing that, cutting out the SSRS, cutting out the report server, cutting out these other things that I won't mention.
Yeah,
Um,
I used to code in SRS for years on my last job, right? So, I was a report monkey, and so I
yeah,
totally get that transition, and it's not easy because they're oil and water, right?
yeah,
I
yep,
have written invoices and timesheets in SSRS. I would never send an invoice out of Power BI. I'd rather die than use Power BI for operational reporting. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, kind of getting them down to one service
Yep.
and designing a bit of that. And so we had a P, what is it? The P, no,
P1's the entry level at
P1. Thank
$5,000
you.
per
I couldn't
month.
think. I'm
Yeah.
so busy, so used to now saying 64. Couldn't think of the
It's
P.
just random letters and numbers. That's all it really is. It's like Azure VMs, but yeah, go ahead.
So when we were doing our Synapse stuff, of course, right at the beginning of it, Fabric went into general, and everybody at Microsoft, why aren't you using Fabric? I'm like, because it's brand new. We've already started Synapse. We're pulling this through Synapse, and then we'll kind of kick the tires for that. And I
Yep.
will say, after doing things with Azure Synapse, with D365, and I will say D365 is one of those things that is, if you're trying to pull it into anything with Azure, you will have to say it's the exception. It's always the exception. Part of the problem with the communication to people is um, you have so many things in different places that
Yes.
says it on one spot, like, hey, if you're doing this in Fabric or you're doing this in Synapse, this is the way you should do it. But if it's D365, all of a sudden they're like, well, it's different. And we're going to not put it in our main space. We're going to put this in this random D365 place that you have to learn this. So that gets
Yeah.
very confusing. Um, but, and I'll go sidetracked easily because I'm neurospicy too. You
No,
have to
no, it's all
believe that.
good. It's all great. This is a casual
Uh,
conversation.
yeah, so one of the things that I found, um, is that once we finished that pilot and learned the things and said, "Okay, now I get why they have Fabric. I get it." I get it because this is so convoluted in Synapse. They said, "We can't change this. We need to make it easier. People aren't gonna get it." And that's how this is my interpretation at the
Right.
time. And that's why they came up with Fabric, because this is just so convoluted. So we said, we're going to do a pilot in Fabric. And the first thing everybody said was, well, an F64 is just like a P1. Do it, do it, do it, do it. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not always the same. And you do have to dig around and find their documentation and see what capabilities you have and what you don't. You
Right.
don't always have the same like shortcut stuff. One of the things we noticed is as you are trying to think of your data strategy, some of the best practices they say for when you're converting to Fabric is, hey, you're going to want to split out those capacities a little bit. You're going to want to have one on your production and maybe one in your
Right.
non-production, maybe one for your reports. Well, now you're talking about having 3 capacities versus your 1. And at first everybody's like, "Yeah, but you can have smaller capacities, so that makes it okay, and you can make them equal that to P1." Well, you lose capabilities when you do that. So
Right.
that becomes a
There's a
problem.
hard threshold at that P1 F64, like huge, huge,
Yeah,
because
yeah. So much
you're
you get
basically it's the
private.
difference between pro licenses or not. It's the difference between Copilot and not. Like that is
Yeah.
a significant kind of thermocline, so to speak, like a temperature barrier. And the other thing, like this is a hot take, but part of the reason that they give that advice is they are only just now implementing surge protection. So they announced like a week ago public preview for some surge protection features at Ignite. They announced they were working on it. And in my opinion, and this is a
Mhm.
humble opinion, I'm sure it's a lot harder to build than it is for me to like spit out hot takes. But the reason that you would want to split out capacities because you're worried that, Eugene over in dev is going to
100%.
take down a whole capacity because you have burstability, which is a great feature, but he's got a
100%.
rogue Spark notebook.
You have too many
And
people that you're pushing for your self-serve analytics. Well,
exactly.
self-serve analytics means people may not know what they're doing, or they may not know best practices, and those best practices are changing all the time because it is a moving,
Right. Well,
target.
and there's no way for them to even know that they're doing something unperformant because
Yeah.
currently, um, people can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think the capacity metrics apps, I don't know if it requires admin privileges, but I know from a customer, like it's not something that they just give access to everybody in the org. And so orgs will treat it like it's an admin thing because that's the way it
Yeah.
looks. But then the question is, if I if I write something that's slow. So for example, I did benchmarking on ways to load data into Fabric.
Uh-huh.
And AZ copy was the fastest by far. 4 times as expensive was the upload to Lakehouse. Now, it was super convenient, but if I'm a user and I'm not a super technically adept one because I come from Power BI, how am I supposed to know I'm doing the wrong thing? It's not like there's a klaxon that goes off. It's like basically you have an apartment building and the manager, the owner, gets the electrical bill.
Yep.
And then they have to come and knock on your door and say, stop running a space heater, you dumb dumb.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Yeah.
you do have to have somebody that I mean, you had to have it a little bit on the Power BI side, but way more in Fabric because there's so much
Right.
more that people could do. People want to do all the things.
There's a variety of
Um,
workloads. So I agree. Like with Power BI, ideally you were doing one thing, you were making Power BI reports. There were some weird offshoots. They're like, oh, but dashboards or metrics or streaming events or whatever. But generally,
uh-huh.
there's one type of workload with a little bit of
Yep.
variation. And so you knew what you were getting.
Yep.
But this is very much like you can run in preview. We've got SQL DBs, we've got Lakehouse's warehouses, notebooks, we've got Power BI, and so the workloads vary hugely. Is this something that we can run at night in large quantities because it's batch, or is it
Right.
real time intelligence, which is literally happening all the time? And
Yep.
so every single time Microsoft adds an option and they're adding more because they talked about like Cosmos DB, Postgres. Every time they add an option, what they're doing is adding a little bit of chaos for the management piece. And I'll give you an analogy. There's a video game called Satisfactory. You probably haven't heard of it,
I
but you
haven't.
check it out. But it's you would probably like it if you're anything like me. But basically, imagine taking Minecraft or some other game, but you're just building a factory
Mhm.
and so, and everything, all of these factory parts consume electricity, but they're not consistent. Because if your operation isn't 100% efficient, what'll happen is, okay, you have these miners that are digging up stuff and you're turning into iron. But if one's faster than the other, then your workloads are spiky. And a small spiky workload is fine, but when you have 1,000 spiky workloads, it becomes this chaotic Brownian motion, and you never know when you're going to hit that threshold. And
Sure.
with Fabric, there's bursting and smoothing, but in Satisfactory, before they hit 1.0, if you cross that threshold, the whole power network would just shut down. So it's a real challenge just built into
Yeah.
the nature of Fabric that they're working on, but it's a
It
problem.
is, and I'll say coming from, the when I was doing my master's, I my focus really was on AI in
Sure.
my degree, because they let me do it. I was like, "Can I substitute this, please?"
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so one thing that I was learning, because at the time I was doing a lot of thing in Google Colab just to and a couple other applications, is that
Yeah.
you may not going in and being new at some of these things, you may not have any idea what compute you need. And it's not until like 18
Right.
hours later and this thing is still running that here or Google Colab kills it because 'cause they're like, "Nope, you didn't pay enough, so we're gonna stop right now."
Yeah.
All these things, you just don't know, and now they've pulled those capability they've put everything under one thing, which is great, but the downside is they've pulled everything into one thing, so you don't know what other people are doing that could potentially, you know, affect your daily reports that business users have to have
Right.
or
It's
multiple.
the noisy neighbor problem. And the problem is the finance folks are really sensitive to noise because they some of these reports are operational, some of these
Yep.
are for regulated reporting. Like if you're a publicly traded company,
Yeah.
you an outage for a day on your financial reporting could be catastrophic. Like it's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like you
You don't
said,
wanna be
some
in
of
the middle
these
of an audit and say, "Oh, that's down to di" right?
right. No, no, no. And the auditors are weird. I mean, and I don't mean this isn't a personal affront, but I did so for a publicly traded company, I helped them do some auditing in SQL Server. So they were on Dynamics Nav. That's how I had experience with it. And I had to set up extended events in SQL Server 2008 R2. So before there was a UI
Yep.
for it.
Yep.
And they were so weird because there was some stuff where they were really picky and they wanted super detailed stuff. And there was
Yeah.
other things where we could just send them a screenshot of SMS that had run a query and they were fine with it. And
Yep.
so you just never know what like they're gonna bite
Yeah.
onto like a
Mhm.
hound dog. You just
Yep,
don't.
and I've worked in the financial sector before, and they get super serious about,
Oh, they get
like, you
twitchy
can't
about a
leave
single penny
oh,
being off.
well, not
Yeah.
even that, you can't even leave something on a shared printer.
Oh,
Like,
yes.
just
Yeah.
it's
So when
everything
for
is
that
even
company
if it's nothingness, you just can't. Um,
for that company, there had to be because of Sarbanes-Oxley, there was a
Yep.
strict firewall between the developers and the deployers. So
Sure.
the report developers were not allowed to hit the publish button. It had to be someone in IT because
Yep,
these are financial controls and they have
yep,
to be certain that no one's manipulating them. So there has
yeah,
to be like multiple checks and balances. I mean, that's the thing that makes me laugh so much whenever like I answer questions on Reddit way too much. And people will see like a bad data model and say just burn it all down. Or someone was asking, how can I build Power BI reports off of a Tableau data model? Which is a legitimate
uh-huh,
question. Because the thing people don't understand is, yeah, if it's Susie's lemonade stand, then we're not too concerned about the financial accuracy. We're not too concerned. But whenever it's a controlled, like a financial control or a regulated report,
yeah,
there may have been weeks that it went into making sure that it was accurate and approved. And you
yep,
can't just tear that all down just because you're not happy with the shape of the model.
yep, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's some of the things, we've run into. Because we had bought the P1, I don't remember if we bought it on a 3-year or 1 year. It expires next year.
Yeah,
So we're
yeah.
having to, and we get the reserved, um, one that everybody wants to get because it's way cheaper. It's 8,000, 5,000 months versus
It's a
8,000
40% difference. Yeah, it's big.
But that also means now that we're trying to do all these things in Fabric and we don't have some capabilities that we have to buy extra. And everybody's
Yeah.
like at first, when I first posted about this, I think last year, I said, well, that's a big pain that we have to pay extra. And everybody said, oh, just do the F2. That's fine. That's all you need. That's all you need. And the F2 does not have the compute power. So
It's teeny
now
tiny.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Now
You can't do the things you have to do with that. So now we've had to, go up each time. So now it becomes okay, well, what do I need to make sure we're doing as we're learning Fabric? We also have to learn how do we do this efficiently?
yeah.
Um,
Well, that's
multiple
I mean, there's a
things.
couple issues there. So, one, I wanna be clear to everyone, Microsoft is working on it, right? I don't wanna pretend they don't know because like, they've got a SKU estimator in private preview right now. You know, they're aware of a lot of these issues, but you're right. I think if you're coming from the Power BI side, you're used to IKEA and now it's Home Depot, but it's even worse than that because occasionally, like if it's an F2, it's not even Home Depot, you're Bear Grylls and you're trying to figure out how to cobble these things together because you can do a
Yeah.
lot with an F2 if you understand the architecture and you are comfortable doing things like pausing it 80% of the time or something
Yeah.
like that. Like you can create your own pseudo serverless kind of approach, but that's like to tell someone who grew up in Excel and Power BI, hey, I need you to build a logic app so you can turn off an F2 daily. Like it's just not, it's a non starter.
Yeah. Yeah. I had to figure that out on the fly as well. So
Right. Like I would love to see more design patterns for small businesses. Now, I get you're not a small business, but that's kind of the thing is I love the flexibility. I love that they've kind of combined the A SKUs and the P SKUs and you can start small and build up. And if you're nimble and creative, you can do a lot with an F2. But I'd love to see so much more about like, okay, here's a cookbook of things you
yeah.
can do with an F2 because it's not necessarily intuitive
It's
and
not
it's
gonna be
really
what you
easy.
never got a warehouse on coming from an ERP, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, no, agreed, right,
Your
yeah.
ETL processes.
Yeah. No, I mean, that all makes sense. I mean, I guess, to be a little bit positive, have there been any things with Fabric that you've been happy about or you're optimistic about so far?
Yeah, so I will say, one of the things that is still a struggle for us is stuff that is outside of Fabric. The inside of Fabric, I do like, it was immediate aha moment going, so I'm used to being in different areas. I'm used to now the Power BI. I'm used to looking at AI stuff, and I'm used to the
Yes, yes.
ETL stuff and all of that. And having that under one roof is really, really nice. So while I do complain about, oh, I got to figure this out and that out and this out, um, really, if I thought about it logically, I would say, well, you kind of have to do that in these other areas anyway. You're just not used to doing this all under one roof. And how do m- being the first in means I have to make sure that I do give other people guidance because there are ways, right? It's just that we don't know it and it's
Yeah,
complicated.
right. We're all kind of figuring this out together in a
Yeah.
lot of ways.
So
Um,
as we do it, I just love it was really a light bulb moment when I was like, "Oh, they're putting it all under one.
yeah.
That's fantastic." So now I can have a pattern for my security that's across the board. And to me, I love that they took the Power BI model, and I know there's debate side on both of it,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I
yeah.
love I love that they took that because I said, "Well, that was like, that first one's free. Here's your drug to get you started." And then people come into Fabric and it's very familiar. And that's a
Right.
good thing, right?
I think
Maybe
that
totally
that was
different areas, but it's familiar and
yes.
people can get their
That was the
groove.
light bulb moment for me, right? Where I got the vision when I saw visual SQL for the SQL Analytics endpoint because like I am not the target customer of that. I can write SQL just fine.
Right,
But I'm
right.
like, this looks a lot like Power Query. And then I looked at the SQL it's generating. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, there's a dollar sign behind every table name. This is Power Query.
Yep,
And
yep,
so that's exciting to be able to take someone who's steeped in these Power BI tools and extend it out a little bit.
yep.
And the biggest problem right now, in my opinion, is Microsoft is kind of doing this buffet approach. Here's all these things you can pick from. There's all these things you can choose. But in order to make the like slight extension, slight growth kind of approach work, you have to give guidance.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can't say you can build out of anything here. You can eat anything here when really you should be like, okay, if you're used to Applebee's, you're used to McDonald's, whatever, here's the things you should take off of the buffet. Maybe don't go to the sushi part. You're gonna be weirded out by the raw fish. Let's start. Look, there's some mashed potatoes and there's some meatloaf at the Chinese restaurant. Let's start slow. And
yep.
so I wish more, and I've got a blog post coming out on this, but I wish more people, Microsoft and my peers included, would put out guidance of like, if you're coming from this angle, focus on these things and maybe turn off or ignore all the other stuff. Don't worry about
Yeah.
Spark notebooks until
Yeah.
you really need it. Right.
Yeah, you definitely need to like figure out a strategy, right? So if you're a Power BI person and you're wanting to get more into like the lake houses and things
Yeah.
like that, which is a natural progression. All right, so look at those different personas, experiences, and look at those directly instead of saying all the things, right? Kind of look at that and touch things that are light. Um, with my user group recently, William Assoff came on
Oh,
and he
sure.
did his contributing to open source Microsoft Docs stuff, and like that to me was amazing because I was thinking like, oh, there's a lot I'm going to be doing as soon as my pilot's
Yeah, yeah,
done
yeah.
for Fabric and some other things because I
Yeah.
do find some of that stuff is either too vague in its documentation currently. It's a lot of stuff in a lot of places, so it's nobody can keep up with it. So I think it's a great thing that they have, and more people need to probably listen to Williams' videos on that, so they can add to that contribution because it's going to be very difficult for a lot of people and let until more people kind of join in and help get that message out.
Yeah, and I'm patient because I don't know when you it sounds like recently, but I don't know when you started with Power BI, but I started in 2016 and
Hmm.
there was nothing. There was
Yeah.
one book by Teo Lechev. That was it. There was no blogs. There was like five bloggers.
What?
And I was so spoiled with SQL Server because you couldn't throw a rock without hitting a SQL Server blogger. And
Yeah.
so I was trying to pivot over. I'm like, oh, I'm just out in the wilderness on my own. And so it may be a couple years before kind of the community catches up with the tooling. And that's
Yep.
that's rough.
Yep. Agreed. So,
So
and it's constantly changing. I'm afraid to do a
yes.
demo in
Yeah.
Fabric, quite frankly, because I know, like, every single time I do something with sharing with team members, it's like, oh, they just moved the thing. So, like in the
Yeah.
middle,
I feel I
yeah,
feel bad for Nicola Illich and Ben Weissman because they're writing a book on fabric and they've had to change it multiple times. But
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we're kind of coming up at the end. So I had a couple of questions for you. What is your favorite fabric feature?
Oh, wow.
And if you're not good at
Um,
favorites, don't worry about it. But
I'm not. I did an interview with,
I
Weissman
look,
and I'm
the
like, "I
link
do have one
told you
link
that we're
through
gonna ask
what
you the
my
favorite and
most
least favorite.
new
You had
favorite."
time to prepare. This is an open book test.
You did, and my ADD made me forget all the
No,
things.
that's fine.
Uh, uh,
You can talk about just
shortcuts,
something you
I
like.
think.
That's fine.
Shortcuts would be my favorite. I
Okay.
think it
Yeah.
has it's a simple thing, but it's got so much potential, both
Right.
inside fabric and connecting things outside of fabric. So
Yeah.
that's, I guess,
Because I was doing some training, and the fact that they were able to just give me a shortcut to de-identify data, super useful. So what's your
yeah.
least favorite fabric feature
Um,
or big friction point?
oh, so not probably because of where we're using it, we
Yeah.
can't really use Fabric Link. We have to use Synapse Link. So that becomes back
Yes.
into the headache world of Synapse Link.
Yeah, yeah. That
So
makes
I know
sense.
they've got things in the pipeline that'll improve that. I wish they would hurry with respects to ERP. Um,
Right.
hopefully they'll hurry up with that. And I hope they start fleshing out domain stuff a little bit more because I think there's great potential with domains, and it's just kinda sitting there not doing a whole lot other than being a glorified tag at the
Yeah, it
moment.
feels like it I hate to say it, but right now, it feels like they needed a checkbox so that they could sell data mesh.
Yeah.
And I really do hope they do more with it because
It's got so much
personally, my vision, I would love role-based access tied to domains. Give me a
Yes.
way to make someone the domain admin for finance, the domain admin for operations. Let's add a little bit more richness and complexity to security and management that isn't just at the workspace level. That would be
Yeah,
perfect.
and they do have that concept, but it doesn't mean what we think it means.
Yeah, yeah.
It means I get to add a domain. Like
Yeah, it's a folder for folders right now,
So
basically.
you articulated perfectly what I meant by like they can expand this. And that's a great use case example because I don't want to be. We have too many things. I can't be the admin of all the things when your business rules are completely different.
Yeah, right,
Um, I
for
can
sure.
come in, pull me in, but you know your data in sales or finance or wherever better than me, so you can make those decisions whether to pull me in or not as needed.
That's funny. This is the best argument I've heard for data mesh in my entire life. Because up until now, it felt like just some weird hogwash of like, "Oh, we'll just push the management to the users, it'll be fine." But the fact that you work at a company that's like a holding company and has these orgs and you have departments with different logic, like that actually starts to make sense. So that
Yeah.
helps.
Totally different business rules
Yeah.
for and even different meanings of what the data is. A customer one may be, my customer in IT is just another person at our company. But that has a totally different meaning to somebody in sales, and that has a totally different meaning to somebody in transportation.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Last question. There's way too many social media networks. Some are getting banned and then unbanned and all this kind of stuff. Where can people find you? And is there anything you want to promote or, you know,
Oh,
plug?
they can find me on Blue Sky, and, no, you did send me this stuff, and I should know.
No, no, it's all good. Sorry for the pop quiz.
Um No, no, no. It's okay. So Krystina D. Mishra at the Blue Sky,
Okay,
typical,
cool.
super easy. Um, that's the best way to find me. I still have things in other places, but that's where I'm really focusing my stuff. You can find me on LinkedIn as well, Krystina Mishra. I'm there as often. Um, until I don't follow what the connection limits are. So
Yeah, yeah,
most of the people I do, unless it's recruiter, and then I think about it for a minute.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, Less on X, and then I'm the organizer for the Kansas City SQL Server user group. That's a lot of words, so we just
We'll put it in the
abbreviate.
show notes so people don't have to spell it. That sounds good.
Yeah, and it's just on Meetup, so I'll send you, that Meetup group. We are virtual. I took over that about a year and a half ago because I wanted to make sure that we had things that were still staying virtual. The person that was running it before stepped down.
Yeah.
Everything had made virtual during COVID, of course, and then things started coming back in person. And I talked to a few people and said, "Hey, is it okay if I keep this virtual? I don't even live in Kansas City." Um,
Yeah, sure.
and the powers that be said, "Yep, that's fine. And yes, you can take it over." So I did, and we have meetings, a lunch and learn, and an evening meeting once a month, an occasional guest appearance as well throughout. So that's really fun, and I'm having a great time with that.
Sounds good. All right. Well, it was a pleasure to have you on. I appreciate your time.
Thanks. Always a pleasure.